Shame is one of those emotions that doesn't always scream out loud, but instead lingers quietly in the background, consuming someone from within. When a person knows they've crossed a line, when they've betrayed trust or acted against the values they once claimed to stand for, it leaves an imprint they cannot simply wash away. She may smile on the outside, she may act like nothing happened, but deep inside, that shame becomes a weight too heavy to carry in your presence. That is why she can no longer face you. Looking into your eyes is like holding up a mirror, and in that reflection, she sees the truth she is trying so hard to escape. The weight of hidden shame is not always obvious. At first, it might look like distance, irritation, or coldness. You might wonder why her energy shifts when she's around you. But shame is tricky. It doesn't announce itself. Instead, it causes avoidance. She avoids your gaze, your presence, even your voice, not because of what you've done, but because of what she carries inside herself. The punishment of shame isn't something you deliver to her, it's something she delivers to herself in silence. Think about it. When someone lies, cheats, or betrays, their actions echo louder in their own mind than in yours. The human heart was never designed to live in complete dishonesty without consequences. You might think she's moved on, that she doesn't care, but every time your name comes up, every time she remembers what she did, that weight presses down harder. She can't stand tall because the memory bends her. She can't speak freely because the guilt chokes her. She can't face you anymore because you remind her of the truth she can't bury. What's even more powerful is that you don't have to do anything to enforce this punishment. Shame doesn't need your anger, it doesn't need your revenge, it doesn't even need your words. The moment she chose actions that betrayed what you both once held sacred, shame became her companion. It follows her into her quiet moments, into her sleep, into her solitude. That is why she may act defensive or pretend like you don't matter. It's a cover for the storm raging within. For you, the important lesson is to understand that this shame is not yours to carry. Too many people make the mistake of chasing closure, demanding explanations, or trying to force accountability. But the truth is, the weight of shame already does more than you ever could. By simply holding your ground and not lowering yourself to anger or begging, you allow that silent punishment to remain where it belongs, with her. And this is why when someone cannot face you anymore, you don't need to question your worth. Their avoidance is not your weakness, it's their unspoken confession. And in that silence, you will always find the truth. Avoidance is often misunderstood. Many people believe that when someone pulls away, when they avoid eye contact or distance themselves, it's a sign of power, a sign that they have moved on or gained control. But the truth is very different. Avoidance is rarely about strength. It is almost always about escape. When she can no longer face you, it isn't because you are unworthy of her presence. It is because being around you forces her to confront a reality she is desperate to run away from. She knows what she has done. She knows the betrayal or disrespect she has allowed. And in your eyes, she sees the reflection of her own choices. A person who feels no shame, no guilt, no regret will not hide. They will stand tall. They will meet you head on because they have nothing to fear. But when someone carries the weight of a broken promise or an act of betrayal, they cannot bear to be reminded of it. That is why she avoids you, why she distances herself, why she chooses silence over conversation. It isn't you she fears, it's herself. She fears what she becomes in your presence. Your very existence reminds her of the truth she cannot face. And so she escapes. convincing herself that disappearing will make it easier to live with. Avoidance is the human way of saying, I can't handle the reflection of my own actions. This is why she might appear cold, dismissive, or even angry. These reactions are masks. They are defense mechanisms. It's easier to act indifferent than to admit guilt. It's easier to avoid than to take responsibility. But every avoidance, every silence, every refusal to face you only deepens the shame she carries. Because deep down she knows that if she truly had nothing to hide, nothing to feel ashamed about, she could look you in the eye without hesitation. And this is where your strength comes in. Too often people chase after those who avoid them. They demand explanations. They beg for answers. They try to force a confrontation. But you must realize something. Her avoidance is already the confession. The very fact that she cannot stand before you speaks louder than any words she could ever say. You don't need her admission. You don't need her excuses. Her silence, her inability to face you is the truth revealed. So do not mistake her escape as power over you. It is not rejection of your worth. It is rejection of herself. She cannot face you anymore, not because you are unworthy, but because the guilt she carries cannot survive in your presence. And that is all the clarity you truly need. There is a subtle but very important difference between guilt and shame, and understanding this difference is the key to seeing why she can no longer face you. Guilt says, I did something wrong. It is connected to an action, a specific behavior, something that can be acknowledged, apologized for, and possibly repaired. Shame, on the other hand, goes deeper. Shame says, I am wrong. It is not tied to just what a person did, but to who they believe themselves to be after doing it. That is why shame is so much heavier, so much harder to face, and so much more paralyzing. When someone feels guilty, they can often come forward. They might say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I know I hurt you. There is at least a path toward redemption because guilt recognizes the wrong act while still holding on to the idea of being a decent person. But when someone feels shame, they avoid, they hide, they disappear. Because looking you in the eye would mean facing not just the action they regret, but the very identity they're ashamed of becoming. This is why she may block you, ghost you, or turn cold. It is not necessarily because she doesn't care. It's because she cares too much about how she looks in your presence. Facing you means facing the reflection of the choices she made. And when shame takes over, people rarely have the courage to stand in front of the person they betrayed. They choose escape over accountability because escape feels safer. The tragedy is that shame often creates a cycle. The more she avoids you, the heavier the shame becomes. The heavier the shame, the more she feels incapable of facing you. And so she buries herself deeper in silence, hoping that time will erase the discomfort, when in reality, time only sharpens it. Every avoided conversation, every missed opportunity to make things right, builds a wall that becomes almost impossible to break down. For you, the lesson is not to internalize this avoidance. It is easy to think she won't face me because I wasn't enough, because I didn't matter. But that is not the truth. Shame isn't about your lack of value. It is about her inability to carry the weight of what she has done. It is her inner punishment, not your failure. And this is why you must recognize that her shame is the loudest form of truth you'll ever receive. Words can lie, Excuses can be manufactured, but shame is raw. It shows itself through avoidance, through silence, through the inability to stand before you. And once you understand that difference between guilt and shame, you no longer need to chase answers. You already have them. There comes a moment when you realize that your greatest power in any relationship is not in what you demand, but in what you refuse to compromise about yourself. When she cannot face you anymore, when shame has already started doing its silent work, the temptation is to confront her, to force her to explain, to beg for closure, but doing so only pulls you down into the same storm she's trapped in. Your strength lies in staying grounded, in refusing to let her actions dictate your worth or your peace. That is what real power looks like, remaining calm, centered, and unshaken, even when she tries to escape, the reflection of her own choices. When you chase, you hand over control. When you beg, you tell her that her avoidance has power over your sense of self. But when you stand tall, when you refuse to lower yourself to anger or desperation, you silently communicate something much stronger. I see the truth, and I don't need to degrade myself to prove it. And that presence alone intensifies her shame, because it shows her that her actions did not break you. Instead, they revealed her. It's easy to confuse love with persistence, to believe that fighting for answers means fighting for the relationship. But the reality is that true strength in relationships doesn't come from forcing someone to stay or to speak. It comes from honoring your own dignity when the other person runs away from theirs. If she cannot face you, let her avoid you. Let her hide. Let her live in that silence. Because her silence is not your loss, it is her burden. And your role is not to carry it for her, but to keep walking forward with your own head held high. The truth is, when you remain grounded, you allow shame to do its own work without interference. You don't need to shout. You don't need to chase it. You don't need to prove anything. Your calmness, your dignity, your refusal to collapse under the weight of her choices, this is what speaks louder than any confrontation. It is in that quiet strength that you show her, and more importantly yourself, that your value was never dependent on how she treated you. And here is the hidden beauty. When you remain grounded, you not only protect yourself from unnecessary pain, you also accelerate her realization. Because while anger can be dismissed, while begging can be pitied, calm strength cannot be ignored. It lingers in her mind. It amplifies her shame. And it reminds her that she lost someone who knew their worth. So the next time you're tempted to demand answers or force accountability, remember this. Your greatest power is not in what you demand from her, but in how firmly you stand in yourself. And that is something shame can never take away. Silence is one of the most powerful truths in human relationships. Words can be twisted, excuses can be rehearsed, lies can be crafted to protect an image, but silence never lies. When she can no longer face you, when her voice disappears and her presence fades, that silence itself is her loudest confession. She doesn't need to say, "I did wrong." She doesn't need to admit the betrayal. The fact that she cannot bring herself to stand in front of you and speak is already the answer you've been searching for. Many people waste their energy trying to force explanations, chasing after words, demanding closure. They think that the truth will finally set them free if only she speaks it out loud. But in reality, the truth is already there. In the avoidance, in the shame, in the silence. When someone refuses to face you, that refusal is the clearest signal of all. It tells you that there is something so heavy, so uncomfortable, that speaking it aloud would break the image they want to preserve. So instead of words, they choose absence. And absence is the proof. This is why you should stop expecting long apologies or dramatic confessions. Those rarely come, and even when they do, they are often watered down, designed to minimize guilt or shift the blame. But silence cannot be watered down. Silence cannot be manipulated. It is raw, it is undeniable, and it is often more revealing than anything that could ever be spoken. When you understand this, you no longer need to beg for closure. You no longer need to plead for explanations that will only leave you unsatisfied. You recognize that her inability to speak, her refusal to face you, is the closure you've been seeking all along. That silence is the answer, and it tells you everything you need to know. She knows what she has done, and she cannot carry the weight of it in front of you. What you must also realize is that her silence does not diminish your worth. It affirms it. If you were insignificant, if you truly didn't matter, she would have no problem confronting you. But the fact that she avoids you means your presence holds weight. It means your eyes carry truth. It means her shame is too heavy to bring into the same room as you. And that is not your burden, it is hers. So do not fear the silence, do not fight it, accept it for what it is, the most honest form of confession. And when you see it this way, you can let go with clarity and peace, knowing that you already received the truth you were waiting for, even if it was never spoken aloud. Silence is one of the most powerful truths in human relationships. Words can be twisted, excuses can be rehearsed, lies can be crafted to protect an image, but silence never lies. When she can no longer face you, when her voice disappears and her presence fades, that silence itself is her loudest confession. She doesn't need to say, "I did wrong." She doesn't need to admit the betrayal. The fact that she cannot bring herself to stand in front of you and speak is already the answer you've been searching for. Many people waste their energy trying to force explanations, chasing after words, demanding closure. They think that the truth will finally set them free if only she speaks it out loud. But in reality, the truth is already there. In the avoidance, in the shame, in the silence. When someone refuses to face you, that refusal is the clearest signal of all. It tells you that there is something so heavy, so uncomfortable, that speaking it aloud would break the image they want to preserve. So instead of words, they choose absence. And absence is the proof. This is why you should stop expecting long apologies or dramatic confessions. Those rarely come, and even when they do, they are often watered down, designed to minimize guilt or shift the blame. But silence cannot be watered down. Silence cannot be manipulated. It is raw, it is undeniable, and it is often more revealing than anything that could ever be spoken. When you understand this, you no longer need to beg for closure. You no longer need to plead for explanations that will only leave you unsatisfied. You recognize that her inability to speak, her refusal to face you, is the closure you've been seeking all along. That silence is the answer, and it tells you everything you need to know. She knows what she has done, and she cannot carry the weight of it in front of you. What you must also realize is that her silence does not diminish your worth, it affirms it. If you were insignificant, if you truly didn't matter, she would have no problem confronting you. But the fact that she avoids you means your presence holds weight. It means your eyes carry truth. It means her shame is too heavy to bring into the same room as you. And that is not your burden, it is hers. So do not fear the silence. Do not fight it. Accept it for what it is, the most honest form of confession. And when you see it this way, you can let go with clarity and peace, knowing that you already received the truth you were waiting for, even if it was never spoken aloud. Shame has a strange way of becoming both a prison and a punishment. When she cannot face you anymore, when every attempt at conversation dies before it begins, it is because the shame inside her has already taken over. It locks her in silence, but it also eats away at her from the inside. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to chase her down. You don't have to force her to admit anything. Her own conscience is already louder than anything you could ever say. That's why shame is often the most effective form of punishment. It never stops whispering, never stops replaying, never stops reminding her of the truth she wishes she could bury. This is why you must resist the urge to involve yourself in her punishment. When you try to lecture her, when you try to rub the mistake in her face, you actually give her a way out. You give her someone to fight with, a distraction to blame, an enemy to point at, so she doesn't have to look inward. But when you stay silent, when you walk away with dignity, you leave her alone with her shame, and that silence is unbearable because there is no one else to blame, no one else to argue with, no one else to carry the weight. It all falls back on her. Think about it. People can defend themselves against anger. They can justify, deny, or even counterattack when you confront them. But no one can defend themselves against their own conscience. That is why your calmness is so powerful. You are not punishing her. She is punishing herself. And that punishment doesn't end when the conversation ends. It lingers long after. It shows up at night when she can't sleep. It follows her when she sees your face. In her memory, it cuts deeper than any argument ever could. And here's the part that matters most for you. Her shame is not your responsibility to heal. Too often people feel tempted to go back, to offer forgiveness, just to ease the other person's discomfort. But that is not your role. You are not the medicine for the wound she created. You are the reminder of what she lost, and she has to sit with that reality until she learns from it. If she chooses to grow, that's her journey. If she chooses to bury it and repeat the same patterns, that's also her choice. Either way, it's no longer your burden to carry. To let her shame remain hers. Do not pick it up. Do not soften it. Do not interfere. The punishment has already begun the moment she could no longer look you in the eyes. And the longer you remain strong, the louder that punishment echoes in her own soul,